Hi, my name is Rachel, and today we're talking about Island of Exiles by Erica Cameron. This was specifically requested by my patron, Emerald Dodge. Thank you for the request. I would have never read this otherwise because I literally never heard about it. While I'm glad I read it because it did allow me to think about how young adult fantasy books were 8 years ago versus now and how they're marketed, and that was a really interesting thing to sort of examine. Again, this was published in 2017, and this was actually published by Entangled under their imprint Entangled Teen. Now, Entangled also owns a imprint that you all know very well, which is Red Tower, which published things like Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain. Very, very popular books on Book Talk. So my expectations were honestly already kind of low because those specific to Red Tower books really let me down. This isn't a 1-star read, Island of Exiles. However, it still didn't hit the mark for me. I did try to find some info beforehand on it though, because the Goodreads synopsis says that this is perfect for fans of Graceling, which is me. How many times in the last 6 months have I screamed about Adventure Fox? Someone made this for me. This is Adventure Fox. He's a blue fox from the Graceling Realm series, specifically from the 4th book, which was Winterkeep, which is one of my favorite books of all time. But when you say for fans of Graceling, that could mean a lot of things because Graceling has now 5 different books with all very different protagonists, and each book has something that I love about it, but that could mean a lot of things, and I noticed that none of my other fellow Graceling Realm lovers have read this book. So I even looked around trying to find out on the internet if anybody had talked about this and find out why this got compared to Graceling. I looked through blogs, I looked through Entangled's website, and I found some interesting perspective from the author on why she wrote other parts of this series the way she did, but no word from anybody on why this got comped to Graceling. I even looked through Entangled's website. Entangled has been obviously really successful with their Red Tower imprint in a way that it looks like their Entangled Teen imprint has not been successful. I scoured their website looking for any book that I had read from them other than this one, Island of Exiles, and I only found one, which was Bring Me Their Hearts, which I read a while ago and I did enjoy. So this brought up some really interesting thoughts about marketing successfully, because doing that is very difficult. Finding a book's specific audience is very difficult. But one thing that can help you do that is today's video's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website building platform that makes it incredibly easy to have a well put together, professional looking, and visually beautiful website of your own for you to engage with your audience and sell anything, whether that's an actual product or content you create, or even your time. I had been wanting to build a website for myself. I wanted to have a place where people could find me and then see where else I am on the internet as sort of like a hub. And Squarespace made this so easy for me. This is my website, which is readswithrachel.com. I have general info on here, as well as links to my recent videos and answers to frequently asked questions and a contact form. It was so easy to put this together and it looks so cute. If you don't know where to start, neither did I. And that's fine because Squarespace offers templates for you that you just customize according to your preferences. If you're a reviewer and want to have a place where everyone can find the different places where you review, or maybe you're an author looking to market your books or sell your books, you can easily do both of those things. Squarespace has e-commerce tools, and they even have a custom merch service that you can utilize without having to worry about production, inventory, shipping. Whatever your online presence or maybe your business includes, you can use Squarespace to help you organize it and market it with a beautiful website. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch your website, you can use the QR code on the screen or go to squarespace.com/readswithrachel for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/readswithrachel. The link is down below in my description, and thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. All right, so we're going to talk about Island of Exiles and the issues I had with it. We're not going to go through like a whole rant review. This isn't one of those. I'm just going to go through and talk about like the technical problems I had with it and offer a book that I think works instead. I get a lot of comments, particularly on I complained about this recently, where people go on my video where I review Powerless and they're like, well, it's a YA book, so what do you expect? Or they get mad at me for reviewing YA books and say, almost as if they think that I'm reviewing YA books on purpose, knowing that they'll be bad because they think that YA equals bad, which is just not true. I review all age ranges. For instance, here's a middle grade graphic novel I recently read. Well, I read it this year. This is for ages 8 to 12. I read all age ranges, and there is no age range of books that is just bad. There is no genre that I would say is just bad either. Powerless is not a bad book. in my opinion, because of its age range, because of its intended audience. It's a bad book because of quality problems. Poor writing, poor character development, poor plot development, world building that absolutely makes no sense. There are plenty of young adult and middle grade books that do not do this. Another middle grade book, just since we're here, since I'm ranting anyway, going off script, oh no. Since we're here, since I'm talking about middle grade books, I want to shout out another one I have, which is The Odds by Lindsay Puckett. This is like gold standard middle grade for me, as is The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. Both of these, though their intended age range is not young adult, it's middle grade, both of these are better written on a sentence level, on a plot level, than Powerless is. Now, is the language a little bit more simplified because the audience is younger? Yes, but that doesn't mean that the quality degrades. I also wouldn't say that Island of Exiles is a low quality book on, if we're talking about quality, in my opinion, being things like sentences that make sense, descriptions that make sense, having a plot. It has a plot. My issues with it more are, I think that the world building was done in a way that was really exciting for the author, but as the audience, I did not enjoy it, and enjoyment is so subjective. So I wouldn't say that this is a low quality YA book. I wouldn't say it's a low quality book no matter who the intended audience is. I would just say that it's not super enjoyable, and I don't like the way that the world building was done, and I want to offer an alternative at the end for a book that is for a young adult audience that is one of my favorite books because it's such a rich story with rich world building and with characters who I fell in love with, and I loved to watch the interactions between them, which unfortunately is just not what I experienced here. Okay, now that that rant is out of the way, let me give you the synopsis for this. In Kaya's world, every breath is a battle. Oh my god, every word is a battle. When you have dyslexia, help me! I need to find out how to get dyslexia font on my laptop, she says, even though she has never updated her laptop in the 8 years that she's owned it. I can hear Carlos over at work saying, I keep telling you to update it, but you never listen to me. True. Okay, let's try it again. In Kaya's world, every breath is a battle. On the isolated desert island of Shiara, dying young is inevitable. The clan comes before self, and protecting her home means Kaya is a warrior above all else. But when following the clan and obeying their leaders could cost her brother his life, Kaya's home becomes a deadly trap. The only person who can help is Tessin, her lifelong rival and the boy who challenges her at every turn. The council she hoped to join has betrayed her, and their secrets, hundreds of years deep, reach around a world she's never seen. To save her brother's life and her island home, her only choice is to trust Tessin, turn against her clan, and go on the run, a betrayal and a death sentence. Unfortunately, I feel like the synopsis gave way too much away, and it takes us 40% to get to like the real inciting incident here, which I think did the book such a disservice. I think that part of why I rated this, which I gave it a 2.25, the reason why I rated this so low is because it was so unenjoyable. I sort of enjoyed the last third, but that first, especially like getting to the inciting incident at 40% was such a slog. And what we're actually doing in that 40% is nothing that I felt was worthwhile that couldn't have been cut off and done elsewhere while we're making a more interesting sequence of events. Like we could have learned about the characters and Kaya's dynamic with her brother, Yori, and Kaya's dynamic with the love interest, Tessin, without waiting 40% to get to the part where it mentions in the synopsis. Now, I feel like the synopsis gives a bunch away. Again, so it gives away, it literally says, the council she hoped to join has betrayed her, and their secrets, hundreds of years deep, reach around a world she's never seen. It just gave it all away. The cool part of this, it mostly gave away. Now there's more specifics about it, like the particulars of who, but you can probably guess who. Now the why of why the bad guy did all this is the most interesting part of the book, but you still gave away so much in your synopsis. Now this is going to be kind of a spoilery video, so just FYI, moving forward, I am going to be spoiling most, if not all of this. So if you're still interested in reading this and don't want spoilers, I would cut out here. Just know that I gave it a 2.25. I don't know that I have anybody that I would say, if somebody were to ask me, can I get a book rec for insert random thing here, I can't think of a situation in which I would recommend this book over tons of other things. There's nothing like hyper specific about it. So there's like other books that I've given 2.25 to that I could recommend to you as a hyper specific rec. I would just say it with the caveat of, I don't think that this book is good. I just think that it's, you know, it's this hyper specific thing you're looking for. An example of this is, are you looking for a love interest that's literally Asterian? Then you should read The Frost Queen's Blade, which I gave 2.25 and can't think of a example in which a more like generalized rec I would, insert that book for. But with this book, I can't even think of like a specific thing that you would say like, insert specific thing here. And I'm like, well, I gave it a 2.25. I guess you could read Island of Exiles. I can't think of anything because there's other books that do everything in here much better. So one thing I will say about this book is that it is a queer normative world. Our main character is bi or pan, but I think everybody's bi or pan. There is also queer rep in the form of gender queerness. This is something I can appreciate, but again, I appreciated it in another book I read last year, which was Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. There's even a word for being gender queer in within the text of Island of Exiles. And in fact, there is an entire glossary full of terms, and every single one of them has left my brain. Now, again, if I'm doing compare and contrast to like other books specifically in the same age range and genre, another book that I had this problem with, but I still liked, was Forest of Souls by Lori M. Lee, which was this book, which has this gorgeous cover. This also had a glossary that I felt like I had to refer back to a little bit too much because it wasn't sinking in within the text, like actually just reading the text. So for example, like all this is glossary, just pages and pages of glossary. And we didn't do a lot with them on the page. Now, the thing that Island of Exiles did is I felt like the glossary was mostly just used to explain the class dynamic, which I wasn't all that interested in, even though that's the main thing happening here. I'm going to talk about this later, but it seems like the author was kind of excited to write a fake language, which was based on Japanese, which I'll also come back to, and also really excited about creating a diverse cast where everybody's sort of just racially ambiguous, but then we didn't really do anything exciting with the actual, like okay, your story isn't racist, so what is it? It's about classism. And then you didn't do anything interesting about classism. You just made fake words around it, and then I'm having to refer back to your glossary, and we didn't really have a conversation on class dynamics. So again, this is spoilery, last warning. And I think what was supposed to be the shining star here was the world building. And while it's certainly complicated, I didn't find these complications, these like layers, interesting. In fact, at some point early on, I just felt like, oh great, there's more and more and more. I think despite the best efforts to avoid info dumping by using the glossary, that was ultimately the effect that it had. And I kept having to, again, refer back to that glossary for every little thing and every little conversation and scene to scene in order to make sense of everything that I was reading. And even now, it's still, I cannot tell you the different names for the different classes. I don't really feel like it mattered in the end. So why did I even need to waste time learning all those terms? Most of that, world building in that glossary is just learning class designations and titles. I shouldn't even call it all the glossary, because first there's an index and then there's a glossary. First and foremost, before we get to the glossary, we have the index, which explains all the different ranks. So first there is, and it just lists them, right? So I don't know if you can see here, okay? It just lists them. First is the Mirise, which are these immortal people who run everything. And below them are the Kaigo. And then beneath that, it's Nishin Lu, Nishin Ri, Nishin Ko, Nishin Ma, Nishin Pa, Nishin Ten. And then it's Ado Na, Ado Mas, Ado Sa, Ado Po, Ado Li, Ado Va. And then it's Yonin, Yonin Na, Yonin Mas, Yonin Sa, Yonin Po, Yonin Li, Yonin Va. What do any of those mean? I don't remember, other than the Mirise and the Kaigo. And I also remember that Tessin, which is Kaya's love interest, is a Nishin 10. And then again, just like Forest of Souls, it has the magic in an index. I just want to be clear before somebody says it. I'm not saying glossary bad, always. I think that it's a good idea for those of us who don't remember within the text, or maybe you put it down for a couple months, you come back to the book. I think that's really helpful, especially for teenagers who don't do what I do and sit and read an entire book in one sitting, right? They come back to it over the course of months. They might, take a couple weeks off, need a refresher. I think that's a really good idea. I like a glossary. I don't like glossary used as substitute for world building, seeing it in its context on the page within the text. So it explains that the magic of Seigensai Itagami is there are Ishiji, stone mages, Raiji, earth mages, Kaishiji, water mages, Maiji, weather mages. And then there are a secondary thing called Desosa mages. Well, there's like several different categories. So our main character is a Desosa mage. Desosa is like the energy in the air. And there's two classifications of dissociamages, and she's a warding dissociamage. Then there's 3 classifications of dissociamages, which is assistive, warding, and offensive, and she's a warding dissociamage. One of her friends is a fire mage, which is an offensive dissociamage. And then there's Okajin mages, which her brother ends up being, where he has enhanced speed, but he doesn't get this until way into the book. And then some people have like telekinesis and the ability to do scrying. Okay, so now that I have just dumped that on you, how much of it do you remember? Probably pretty little, right? So then we get to the glossary, and then it explains, like, it says that Auto are the second class citizens, and that dissocia is the ambient energy of the world. And it explains that there is a designated term for somebody whose sex does not align with male or female, which is ibet. There's a term for menstruation, which is gensu. And then it actually gives spoilers, so if you read this glossary while you're reading, it's going to spoil for you the fact that Ryogo, which is where certain people will go when they die, where it's like a bad afterlife, it says, although Itagamen citizens believes this to be, Itagamen citizens believes, oh, it's a typo, this to be the name of the paradisiacal afterlife, it is the name of the country from which Varen, Suzu, Sua, Chio, and the other Mirise came. That's a pretty huge spoiler for the end of the book. So you can see that this is kind of messy because if you need the glossary to refer back while you're reading, you're gonna get spoiled for pretty big parts of the plot. I think that a glossary is a really good idea, but if you're expecting it to be used during reading, which is very helpful for some people who again might put it down and then need to come back to it, putting spoilers in it is a terrible idea. So while I think this book was, trying really, really hard to be in the way that it was described in marketing, diverse, and it was trying to be very queer normative, it's also being pretty sex positive. So like, these are like upper YA, these are like 17-year-olds and there is no like purity culture here. There is asexuality. And then there are people who have like, have had sex before and there's no like stigma around that. And there is no like on-page sex. It's just explaining that it's not like puritanical, but also it's normal to be that way. It's normal to be asexual. And I think that that's great, but I just don't understand why we spent time building like that, making that established, but we didn't spend time doing like the theme of classism and writing, the terms inside the book in a way that the reader would absorb. Just really inefficient use of time here. A glossary just is not a substitute for conversation within the book to explain to the reader. I both wanted more from this book, but also kept wishing for it to get to the point and get on with the story and feeling like, forget it. I'll just experience it with like not having like a full grasp all the time. I don't need for every single piece to be explored for it to just get to the point and say what it wants to say. I can't say that there was much by way of like other moving parts of this that I felt I like needed, let alone wanted to keep track of outside of the class designations. I can't really explain to you. The magic, like, it makes sense, but I would often forget what specifics there were unless I would refer back to the glossary. Again, ongoing theme here. But then also I would specifically forget what power our main character Kaya had because it came up so rarely. In some ways, the magic is linked to your class designation. And again, there's like different kinds of, there's like groups of powers and then subgroups, and I would forget all of that while reading. The only reason it's fresh in my mind right now is because I just read it to you, but I would so often have to like fall back on that. But then having finished the book, I'm like, well, what was the point of me needing to know that at all? I think the way we use time here could have helped made this more engaging. We could have cut the beginning of the book and fast forwarded again to the part where our main character's brother dies, or she believes that he dies. And I think that the synopsis certainly should have just said Kaya's brother is dead, but then there's more to that than meets the eye, because it's kind of a huge spoiler to be like, he's not dead. Guess who's behind it? The people in charge. That's kind of that's the twist that you just gave it all away in the synopsis. But again, we could have just cut all of that out. We could have started the book like where he died and gone from there. And I think that would have been way more interesting. And also like I hate when we take 40 to 50 to 60% to catch up to the synopsis, because it leaves very little room for me to feel like I'm excited to see what happens next. I'm waiting for you to get to the point when you do that. We have this like really interesting villain origin story, in my opinion, with Varen, who's like the sort of the leader of the Mirise, which are the immortal runners of this desert island. That was revealed in the last third of the book. That's the more interesting story here. Kaya, her brother, his love interest, her love interest, these are not super compelling characters that I really wanted to sit with and experience the happenings of the world alongside of. They could have all died and I would have felt nothing. And I also don't feel like it would have made a huge difference to the story itself, like what was happening. Anybody could come in and fix this problem of the mirror, say. There is a romance here that becomes more significant in the last piece of the story, but also the theme of like platonic love and familial love exists, despite the fact that you're not really supposed to have a family. The clan is supposed to be like, you're supposed to be loyal to your clan, not, you know, like loyal to your clan and most of all to your family. But that is the relationship that Kaya and her brother Yori have, because they do come from the same parents, and you have blood parents who do not raise you. And it's very rare for people to have two children who then grow up together like siblings in the nursery, but Yori and Kaya did. I'm surprised that this was allowed, to be honest. And I liked that there is, you know, this like building of this platonic relationship, this platonic love between Yori's sort of partner after Yori is dead and Kaya. So basically her brother's partner, and her form a platonic bond. But I would have liked to see more out of this. This is not really a book that I would point to and say, this is how it's done as far as platonic love. Again, I would recommend Forest of Souls for that, but also if you're looking for an adult book, I would say that platonic love is so well done in Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. Kaya's motivation throughout the story is her brother, but again, the first 40% before her brother dies, she's trying to get her brother to be in this very particular position in this like class structure, and I don't really understand why she does what she does in the beginning, trying to get her brother into a certain position in this hierarchy, and even Kaya herself questions this. Why am I doing this? To keep my brother around, she said. And I'm like, I don't know, girl, it's your book, you tell me. I wanted to see like deeper connections, but in order to appreciate deep connections between characters, you have to know and on some level care about characters on their own before you're going to care about them together. And this book was so busy using its like fantasy world words like Nishin Ma, Nishin Po, Nishin Ten. We didn't build those relationships. We didn't build them between character and reader, and we didn't build them between character and character. These don't feel like real people that I have a vested interest in. They feel like characters. And again, if one of them died, if any of them died, if all of them died, it would have zero impact on me. I would have no reaction to that. Something that this book tried to do beyond just like platonic love and some sort of lip service thing to classism, I guess, is it positions itself again as this diverse fantasy book. So there's this interview with the author where she says this, I'll read it to you. The entire language system and all the character names evolved based on Tessen's name. Originally, everyone and everything had a different name except Tessen. I initially named him after the viciously beautiful iron-bladed fan from Japan, and his name fit him so well, I didn't want to change it, so instead I shifted everyone else around him. Since his name is Japanese, that was the language that became the source for the rest of my manufactured words. His is the only word I literally borrowed from another language, but the rest of the words are based on Japanese. I borrowed sounds and patterns more than anything else. The words I use in the book are as much idegamen, though, as I could make them. They're also more or less phonetically pronounced. What makes your series unique? These are the two things I'm proud to claim for my series. The first is that it's an entirely non-white cast. The second is that within the primary culture I introduced in Island of Exiles, there are 3 acknowledged and accepted sexes, and bisexuality is the norm. All other sexualities are also accepted, including asexuality, for which I created the word ushimo, and polyamory is just as common as monogamy. Seigensai Itagami does have its social issues and problems, but prejudice about skin color or sexuality is not included on that list. When she was explaining the book, she was saying more what the book wasn't rather than what it is. Well, it's not about racism, and it's not about homophobia, but it is about classism. So I would really like if we would have a conversation on why that was important to you. Why was it important to have this story about leaders who have gone to incredible lengths to swindle the people? What happens when you start breaking down those class dynamics and this structure, this hierarchy that has kept people in line? I wish the author has been excited about those conversations instead. I don't feel super comfortable with the idea of taking like Japanese words and then switching around some things in order to make your own fake language so that your world building sounds cool, but then also make that world devoid of race, or at least racism. But then there's also the point of, why did we write a world devoid of racism, but then have classism with no thought to how those things typically like intersect, overlap in our world? I just don't think that that was a good idea, even if I don't think that there was any malicious intent there in the creation of this. The only real standout thing here is the villain, which is Varen, who's the leader of the Mirasay. We come to understand later in the story that he came from a different place than the island of Itagami, where he was playing with human morality. It's mortality, Rachel. It's human mortality. It's just embarrassing. Get it together. And he and some others were exiled to the island that they currently live on and run. It's a bit more complicated than that, but the stuff that happened there was fascinating. I think that we should have had flashback scenes to all that, maybe not so much like we know that it's Varen, but we know that this happened somewhere with somebody, and then later reveal that it's also the same guy who did all this, who got exiled, is Varen, leader of Itagami, right? The island that he and others run, have this hierarchy, is part of a process where they take people like Yori, Kaya's brother, as part of this process to continue their immortality. So they need like power from certain people. They've been faking the deaths of certain people, one of whom is Yori. And I think that this is a super fascinating concept. But again, like our time with this villain and his backstory is so fleeting. And even our time with this as the plot was not enough, because again, it took 40% for us to get to an inciting incident. This is a story I think could have benefited from an inciting incident at the beginning, like Percy Jackson does. I really think that the setup of leaders in charge of a kind of like smaller group lying to their subordinates for one reason or another, whether it's like in this book's case of lying to maintain power, or in the case of The Village, which if you've never watched The Village, I'm about to spoil it, so run. Mute me until this is no longer on my screen. This is about trying to shelter people from knowledge or experiences that you think would harm them, but this is taken to an absolutely wild degree in The Village, where this is like a very sheltered community because they think that the outside world is so dangerous, and the answer was to seclude inside this village that is kept completely separate from the outside world. So you have no idea that this is like happening in our world. What a fascinating concept, honestly. But the reason it works so well in The Village is because we're not zoomed in on Bryce Dallas Howard the entire time. We have great scenes between her and the village leaders. So then when you get the full context of what's happening, when you zoom out even further, that stings because you started to put trust in those village leaders. Island of Exiles could have really benefited from zooming off of Kaya a bit and having more interactions with the Mirasay, but instead we kind of paint the Mirasay as evil right off the bat. So when it's revealed like what they were doing, I'm like, yeah, that it doesn't really surprise me. I think it's kind of cool actually. Can I see it from their POV? But it wasn't like a, oh, the leaders did this? Like in The Village. There's that moment in The Village where Bryce Dallas Howard is, and she is blind in the movie. She is led out to a shed where they keep this costume of this beast that they use to keep everybody afraid and keep everyone in their house and keep them from leaving the village. And this is such a betrayal when for the audience as well, because we're like, no fucking way, the beast was a lie the whole time, you lied to me. Well, in Island of Exiles, it doesn't work because we knew that they were shitty. The fucking movie threw me for a loop. What also could have made this more interesting to inhabit beyond like shifting perspectives to, you know, give a little bit broader perspective is just the world we're in. I don't find that interesting. Now, part of this is like personal preference because I don't reach for island settings in my fantasy books. I think this is entirely due to the fact that I live in Florida, and when I finally left Florida, it was to go live on an island. So I think I'm just a little bit palm treed out. I just want to be transported so badly, but I could have lived with it if we had more magical pieces of this to bask in, but they're just not here. The magic here, despite having a whole glossary to explain it, still feels incredibly shallow. As I've said before, Kaya has ward magic. Tessin has a sort of like empathy power, kind of. That's her love interest. All things I've seen before. One person has light magic, one person runs real fast, one person has fire magic. It's all pretty forgettable. This isn't a book that will like stick with me, but I want to offer a case of another young adult book I read about 5 years ago that has stayed with me. And that is Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. This is a book that has stayed with me. This is a book I gave 5 stars. This is one that I think has a very compelling character in a similar situation to Kaya in that people are going missing. And the details surrounding that are kind of sketchy. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for this because I really want you to read it. This is also one that I felt was so effortlessly world built and created memorable characters and interactions between characters that have stayed with me in the 5 years since I have read this, and one that has multiple villains, great villains, and villains that have become sort of like a blueprint in my mind for what I want to see in a villain. So this is a YA fantasy book about a young woman named Ara, who is from a powerful line of witch doctors. She's been waiting years for her own power to manifest naturally and has all but given up hope that this will happen. Her grandmother, who is a chieftain, is rooting for her. Her mom is disappointed in her. But there's another way to gain magic in this world, which is to use a form of magic that involves you trading away years of your life. So this is a non-starter as far as Ara is concerned until children in the kingdom start going missing. Investigating the disappearances and using magic that trades away her life, Ara also, in the process of doing that, Ara also learns that the demon king who was imprisoned is making some moves and will eventually destroy her whole kingdom. This is on the longer side. This is about 475 pages, I think, right? Yeah, so we're at almost 500 pages. Some people will struggle with the pacing of this. If I remember correctly, back when this came out, I remember a couple people struggling with the pacing here. I did not. I really loved the care taken here in giving us a rich world with a kingdom that has these very distinct tribes and so many different forms of magic, and I easily grasped what was going on here, and you did not need a glossary to do it. There's also a creepy forest in here, which, if you don't know, I'm kind of a sucker for. But another thing that deeply appeals to me in here is this is a book with mommy issues. A mom giving her daughter a complex. Ara's mother is a deeply ambitious woman who is not very kind to Ara or anybody else. This was simultaneously horrifying and cathartic to watch unfold, similarly to how I felt reading Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, which is up there somewhere, which had a similar dynamic between mother and daughter. This is something that was missing, I think, in Island of Exiles that could have really, because in this, Ara is really, who she is as a person is really informed by who her parents are and how they treat her. In Island of Exiles, Kaya and her brother aren't raised by their parents. Again, they have blood parents, but they're raised in a nursery together. But you know who your blood parents are, but you're in no way nurtured by them. So what are the implications of this? How does this affect who you are as a person? This setup where you are in a way abandoned. That's what I wanted from Island of Exiles. The emotional abandonment of Ara's mother in this book has a profound impact on Ara, but also me as a reader. That's one of my biggest takeaways from this book. This is on my list of mommy issues books. On the other hand, Ara's grandmother, who's a chieftain, and then there's, her and her nurturing, and then also there's Ara's father, who is a deeply caring parental figure that is filling, like he is the warmth filling in for the ice left behind by Ara's mom. Due to circumstances, Ara also begins to lose her father, or rather he begins to lose himself, and not having that solid support only makes Ara more desperate when she's already in this position of desperation, using this magic that is taking pieces of her while she's trying to solve this mystery of what's happening to these missing children. This is what I consider gold standard world building in a young adult fantasy, but also exploration of those themes, like how, your abandonment by your parents in one way or another informs who you are as a person. So this is what I wish Island of Exiles has been more like. Let me know what book you consider to be gold standard, and let me know if it has a glossary or not. So I'm really interested to see how many of you are actually using the glossary. I know a lot of people skip prologues. Are you guys also skipping glossaries? Let me know. I'm always interested to hear how other people are doing books, reading books, experiencing books, utilizing their books. I want to say doing books differently than I am. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Comments and questions go down below. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I will see you next time. Bye. And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons are Alexander, Andy, Ashley H, Astra, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Cami, Chocos, Homesick for Taiwan, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Eric D, Jess, Joel White, John E, K, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Katie M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Another Lex, Lily, Mataraptor, Max B, Megwin Rose, Melissa, Minby, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlett, Spoopy, Steph Bowen, 3 Raccoons in a Trench Coat, I love that name, Tori, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxists, and those are Alejandra, Alicia Needs a Nap, Alistair, Althea, Amanda D, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blythe, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Bree, Kate B, Caitlin, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Claire Online, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Courtney, Darius, Danielle, Desiree Michelle, Dorothea, Is Not Like Other Girls, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Aaron with 2 E's, Fiona, Gadarn, Gilf Enthusiast, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Harpy Curo, Helen P, Harising, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jello Salad, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kai, Catherine, Katie, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Lindsay, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, Mima Who, Myth Lesbian, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Paige P, Pandemonium, Paul, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rhea, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sakoria, Sadie, Saintbringer, Sakyalume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Sophie L, Stardust, T Delegati, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, This Is Not a Trap, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Wobbs, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.